Climate change, we know, is real, it's urgent, and it's happening, right? Science has been telling us this for many, many decades, but what's happening now is that we can really see it with our own eyes. So if you take everything from the wildfires in California through to the wildfires in Australia last year, extreme flooding here in the UK where I live, in Africa, extreme weather, droughts. So we are really starting to see and feel the impact on our societies, on our communities, and understand that this is an urgent and important challenge that we have to take action on as urgently as we can.
What about when we look at Africa? What can you tell us in terms of how climate is affecting the continent and what kind of urgency we are seeing?
I mean, it's having devastating impacts across the continent. So, one of the things that's really worth remembering is that Africa has contributed the least to climate change in terms of the emissions from the continent, but is suffering some of the worst impacts. So, in many parts of the continent, you see extreme weather, droughts, heavy rainfall, which makes it very, very hard for people to plan, makes it hard for them to sort of harvest their crops at the right time, which of course means that people are going hungry. And of course, that leads to all kinds of impacts, including, unfortunately, the loss of life, migration across the continent. So this is a very, very urgent issue for Africa and has been for quite some time.
We see that people such as yourself, climate activists, are really coming forward, getting engaged into raising awareness about climate change. So, why is it important for individual action when it comes to climate change? Why is it so important for people to get involved, especially when we know that companies are some of the biggest emitters?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Linord. Companies and actually governments are ultimately responsible for taking the lead in transforming our economies and societies because fundamentally that is what we need to do to tackle climate change. Um, and at the same time, we know that individuals are incredibly powerful in influencing what businesses and governments choose to do. So as people, we are consumers, we are citizens, and we can signal both in terms of the action that we take in our own lives and in terms of really using our voice to tell our politicians, to tell our employers that we want them to take action as urgently as possible. And when we do that together, when we act in solidarity, that message is incredibly powerful, and businesses and governments will listen.
To fight climate change, what do you say to the average citizen that they can do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lenord. So, and it's really why we launched Count Us In, because this challenge can feel really, really overwhelming. And we've worked with experts really to develop some really practical and high impact steps that you or I and anyone that's watching or listening can take in their own lives. So it's everything from walking and cycling more to getting solar power to repairing and reusing your clothes instead of buying new ones, through to, as you said, really using your voice, speaking to your politicians, and speaking up at work. So there's something for everyone. We wanted this to be really relevant to anybody, depending on whatever kind of circumstances you find yourselves in. But crucially, what we're going to do is across all of those different steps, there are 16 of them that people can choose from. We're going to aggregate the actions that people take so that we are actually acting in solidarity when we take action through the Count Us In campaign.
There is now the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19. Other crises are ongoing in the world. You talked about leaders and what they can do. Why is it so important now more than ever?
We're in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and it's wreaking havoc on people's lives in lots of different ways, and we really recognize that. But if there are two things we can take away from this crisis so far, from the COVID pandemic, it's that we need to listen to science, we need to listen to the experts, and we need to take early action. So a failure to plan is really planning to fail. And scientists are telling us that the climate crisis remains urgent, and that we need to take swift action. So that's the first reason. But the second, I would say, is, again, experts are telling us that the best way to rebuild our societies and our economies out of this pandemic is actually a green recovery. That is what's going to secure sustainable jobs for the future, and that's what's going to make us more resilient to any future pandemics that we might experience. So this is really the perfect time for us as individuals, as businesses, to be thinking about what actions we can take to tackle climate change, because it's a very, very connected crisis to the COVID crisis.
Sayo Ayodele, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Linord. It's been great.